Hey everybody, it's RJ, your host, and welcome to Hash It Out. In this episode, I'll be speaking with Ben Larson of Vertosa about the gray area in cannabis manufacturing that exists with the current state of federal regulations in the US. We'll also discuss the importance of the scientific pursuit to discover all of the chemical compounds and beneficial applications of cannabis and hemp, incremental versus comprehensive approaches to federal cannabis policy reform in the US, and much more. Without further ado, let's hash it out. All right. My guest today is the CEO of the cannabinoid infusion company Vertosa. Welcome to the show, Ben Larson. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, RJ. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, man. And thank you so much for joining us virtually. Where are you joining us virtually from today, actually?
Yeah, I'm in the Bay Area in California, standing in Walnut Creek, which is about 15 minutes outside of our home base in Oakland.
Okay, right on. And yeah, we just mentioned before the show started that I'm in Orange County, so we're not too far from one another, just a stone's throw away.
That's right.
Right
Same
on.
time
But
zone
hey,
is
thank you
always a
so
win.
much. That's right. Same time zone. Yeah, makes things a little more easy when it comes to coordinating schedules here. But hey, thank you so much. I understand that you are sort of in the middle of a fundraising mode. So I know that you have got a whole lot on your plate right now. So I'm very grateful for you to carve out the time and sit down and have a conversation with me today to talk about all that you've got going on over at Vertosa. And then, of course, going into some of the latest cannabis news and some of the trending cannabis topics that the people are talking about out there, man. So thank you so much. Jumping right in here, I had mentioned that Vertosa is a cannabinoid infusion company. To be a little more specific here, Vertosa is a product infusion company that uses patent-pending nano-emulsions and pre-suspended aqueous solutions to create products that are meant to maximize bioavailability, clarity, and taste. Now, the company's website says that Vertosa exists, quote, at the intersection of plant medicine and science, which sounds very exciting. So for you, what remains to be discovered about cannabis's biology and scientific and medical applications that excite you in particular? And then what is Vertosa working on in that regard?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's a lot. So I'm going to unpack it a little bit
Sure.
for the sake of the listeners.
Absolutely.
Simply put, we're an active ingredient company. We exist in the supply chain purely to be B2B and really create ingredients that brands can rely on to provide efficacious products, right? And so the genesis for Vertosa really came along back in 2018 when we founded the company, where everyone was vertically integrating, everyone was trying to do everything, and that's not how great industries are built. People need to have reliable B2B partners, and so that's what we are at the heart of it. And so, to get to your question, what is the opportunity for us to really apply our science? We do have PhDs on staff that are, have backgrounds in organic chemistry, surface chemistry, biology, you name it, and what we commonly say in the industry is that we're in the first inning, and that really is the case when it comes to what is left to be uncovered. We generally know some of the applications for THC, CBD, and some of the other compounds, but do we truly know the efficacy? And have we done the studies to understand, whether CBN actually promotes good, healthy sleep, or what it needs to be combined with to provide, efficacious products? And a lot of those, answers lie in the realm right now of being, anecdotal or having limited studies with limited, data points. And so I think there's infinite directions that we can take this to really understand. But what we've been able to accomplish in the last, 3 or 4 years of business is, at least ensuring that what we are intending to put in products is what goes in, what remains in the product, and then what the consumer feels, right? And so, at least in the very least, that gives us the baseline to do these studies and really understand that, we know what's happening, when the compounds enter into the body. It's like, are you actually absorbing THC into your bloodstream, or is it some sort of metabolite, because of the way it's being absorbed in the body? And so, all these things, a lot of big words, a lot of confusion can be created here. But at the end of the day, you know, we want to put proof behind all those claims that we've all heard over over the decades, especially those of us in California, right? Cannabis has been a
Mm.
part of our culture, and we believe that there are many applications, but we want to know, almost to a pharmaceutical level, uh, what can cannabis be used for, and what can it be counted on, and what can it be better for in comparison to other medicines.
Certainly. And when it comes to, as you mentioned, the pharmaceutical applications or the specific applications for specific chemical compounds found in hemp and cannabis,
Hmm.
when it comes to conducting that sort of research and those sorts of very crucial studies that are, instrumental in shaping how we may utilize the cannabis and the hemp plants in the future, um, how do the state of federal regulations or even state regulations in California sort of hinder the pursuit of that scientific discovery, if at all?
Uh, Yeah, this is a constantly evolving conversation. I mentioned it being the first inning, and that largely has been due to prohibition. It's not that we haven't wanted to research it, it's just that we haven't been able to. And it's actually a very pertinent discussion right now because there is federal uh, easing of regulations around cannabis. Like we no longer only have to go to the University of Mississippi to get, researchable cannabis. That
Yeah.
is now opening up to access different sources, and funding for research is increasing, and so there's a lot of opportunities there. As it pertains to what we're able to do in California, for instance, we've teamed up with a very reputable third-party pharmaceutical lab where they're helping us do like real person blood studies, and so we've over the last few years have been taking our team members in dosing ourselves with particular types of formulations and tracking how the compounds are propagating through the bloodstream. And it's the dedication to this kind of work that truly lets us understand the products that we're creating. Because at the beginning of the show you mentioned nanoemulsions, right?
Hmm.
Yes, it's a way to get cannabis to stabilize in a an aqueous format like a beverage. We also do fast acting gummies and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the emulsion itself is kind of like it's an API. It's a drug delivery mechanism, and so to truly understand how effective that is at getting compounds into the bloodstream is important, right? And so as we start looking at other markets, Canada, for instance, is federally legal. So you can actually, if you're a Canadian company, you can actually get federal research credits towards your investigation of these different applications. Even if you're just trying to develop the APIs to do research, right? You can get those federal grants. And so that's a big opportunity if you start thinking about cross borders. We are engaged with University of Massachusetts and submitting on, some NIH grants that are available. And so, um, it's becoming a lot more opportunities are coming to light, and it's an exciting time. But again, it's really early. So if you have an idea and if you have an interest, there's infinite opportunities to get involved.
And speaking of those, infinite opportunities, I'll quote the great Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park when I say life finds a way, because when it comes to these sorts of cannabinoids, which we're always finding, new chemical compounds in the plants, and then, of course, new applications for those chemical compounds in the plants. When it comes to that and federal regulations, particularly here in the U.S., there seems to cause some sort of a disconnect or even a gray area when it comes to doing this sort of scientific research,
Hmm.
and sort of navigating the web of federal regulations or even state or local level regulations. When it comes to science and federal legislation in the U.S., there has been an ongoing issue with the law passed by Congress in 2018, making it legal, federally legal, to grow hemp as long as the plants don't contain high levels of Delta 9 THC. Now,
Hmm.
in states where cannabis hasn't been legalized yet, there's a growing market for new products that contain Delta 8 THC, which is synthetically sourced from hemp, but not covered so far, at least by federal regulations. So my question for you is, from a scientific standpoint specifically, how do you feel about the scientific pursuit for these various compounds and the applications that they may offer when it sort of exists in like this weird gray area in terms of federal regulations? And then how does that affect your operations over at Vertosa?
Uh, yeah, great and very complex question. So to
Mm.
answer it as you asked, scientifically, I love this, right? The ability to pursue and manufacture and create reliable compounds in mass and not have it be, you know, uh, convoluted with other compounds, right? And so that's interesting, especially from a medicine perspective. Like if you want, if we found that Delta 8, for instance, had a really great medical application, and we needed to create a pure compound in mass, like these methods are viable ways to do so. Um, the complexity lies in the fact that regulations can never keep up with the speed of science, right? And especially with this patchwork regulations that we have in the cannabis industry, where, we have 40 some odd states that have decided that, there is some pathway for legal cannabis in their state, and yet it's still a Schedule One, drug when you ask the feds, right? So that's
Yeah.
creating this untenable situation where, is it legal or is it not? And when it does go legal, what does that mean for everything? But, the problem is that, and I guess I'll answer it from the lens of like, how does this affect our business? We kind of have to take it on a case by case basis, and we have to hold the manufacturers of these ingredients to the highest levels, right? And so if we identify, the manufacturer of Delta 8, so we first start with like the quality of the product. It's like,
Hmm.
how are they manufacturing it? How are we sure about the purity and consistency of that product? And stopping right there, is not everyone's being held to the highest standards because, frankly, of this gray area that sits with the federal government, and there's no, set regulations as far as, what solvents are being evaluated when you're testing, or what are you testing for? Really, the only thing you have to test for, and this is market driven, is potency. And so if you have, say, a compound that's 60% pure, and you're just reporting on how much Delta 8's in there, it's like, what's the other 40%? Is it damaging, so on and so forth.
Right.
This all said, we only know what we know, right? And so we assume that all these compounds that are naturally derived on the cannabis plant are safe because we've been consuming cannabis for millennia. There's not a ton of adverse reactions or overdoses, and so it's like we make this leap to, oh, anything naturally derived from the cannabis plant is safe. But then we also have to take into consideration like concentration. How much Delta
Mm.
8 can we consume safely, or how much limonene, a terpene, a popular terpene, like how much of that can we consume in mass when it's actually a pretty minor amount of concentration in a naturally derived cannabis plant, right? And so,
Mm.
what we've done at Vertosa is like, we only know what we actually know, like what we've studied, what we've collected data on. Everything outside of that realm, we don't. And so we can, we can proceed with a certain level of safety with certain areas like these compounds. But yeah, I mean, I don't think as an industry we should be overselling ourselves because we've worked so hard to build the trust of, the consumer, of the regulators, of each other, right? And anything we do that might break down that trust can like set us back a few steps. And so as a company, we've drawn a very clear line of, we will work with Delta 8 if there's a clear path into a regulated market, right? And so some states have identified that you can use hemp derived compounds in the cannabis supply chain if you go through this onboarding process, right? And it's like, okay, we will work in that. But, we do not support, delivery of Delta 8 products into 50 states, via, e-commerce, right? We feel that, the laws that are put in place by these various states and to some extent the federal government, um, are put there largely with the right intentions, with public safety in mind. And if children are somehow getting access to psychoactive compounds derived from the cannabis plant, um, then we might have a problem on our hands. And I think those are already starting to show up in the adverse event reporting system that is available, by the federal government. The other part of it that, you know, we get a lot of perspective in because we work with a lot of companies in the supply chain is, there's a lot of companies that are trying really hard to follow all the rules in the regulated cannabis market, and it's not easy, and it's really expensive, and it
Yeah.
doesn't make a lot of sense. It's what we need to do to move this industry forward, and those companies are now being undercut by people that are releasing these, gray market products because yeah, Delta 8's one thing, but there's also now hemp derived Delta 9 that is being marketed. And there's hemp derived THCO acetate, which theoretically I've seen has like 30 times the potency of Delta 9, which is also now hemp derived. And if these products are
Oh.
being marketed and sold beyond state borders and don't have the same taxation and requirements as a regulated cannabis industry, all of a sudden you have one product right next to the other that could be the exact same thing from a chemical perspective, from a science perspective, but it's half the cost. And now like now we have like much, just much bigger problems as far as the viability of a legal market goes, right? And so
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very complicated area. There's the scientific perspective. I love, I'm not inherently against any cannabinoid. I'm a big fan of them.
Totally.
But from a business perspective, from a community perspective, and like the progression of the movement, I do have some pretty significant concerns about the synthesized market.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying that you find it important to essentially just make sure we know, or what you're putting in your products before you put them in your products, which sounds overly simplified, but it's an important thing that I feel like not every company, because you have companies jumping at this Delta 8 wave right now when
Yeah.
I mean, as of now, there's not too much known about it scientifically, if I have that correct.
Well, what we know about it, and I will be very clear about this.
Sure.
Delta 8 is a psychoactive compound, very similar to Delta 9, but less potent. It's not some super CBD as I've heard it, promoted, right? It is not. It is what it is not is non-psychoactive, which I've also heard it promoted as. And so need to call a spade, right? It is skirting laws to get, to help these companies become viable. And I get that, right? Like I understand how hard it is to run a business in the space and how to make a profitable business in the space. And regulations have made it really hard. But we're kind of in this in-between state where as an industry, we need to be patient and persistent, right? We need to kind of continue the path that we've already started down, or else, we shoot ourselves in the foot. And, some of these people that are entering the space and trying to jump on the Delta 8 bandwagon, they haven't been here for the last decade or two, like fighting for this movement, right? They're just being opportunistic. So also calling a spade, it's like these aren't the same people that have been pushing for legalization or regulated market. What we have done as a regulated market is skated ahead, self-regulated, and created the standards for ourselves to build trust. And that's what we stand for as a company, and why like this is like, and you can tell through my voice, like I actually I'm pretty passionate about this because you know I just don't want the hammer to come down because of some bad actors, and I don't want it to impact the rest of the industry. And if we break that trust with regulators and consumers, it gets really hard to get it back, right? And it's like
Oh, yeah.
um, yeah, I think I always butcher this quote, but I think Warren Buffett says like it takes decades to build trust and just minutes to break it. And
Yes.
I feel like that is a very pertinent quote for like this particular point in time because We're so close. It's a bipartisan issue. Both Republicans and Democrats are talking about federal legalization. Focus your
Mm-hmm.
energy there, not just making a quick buck.
Certainly, certainly. And then speaking of the bipartisan support on the federal level for cannabis policy reform in this country, there are several attempts right now to sort of potentially and hopefully close that gray area that exists currently in terms of cannabis regulations.
Mm-hmm.
There's of course the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, which is being championed by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. That bill seeks to decriminalize and deschedule cannabis from the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Meanwhile, there is also Representative Nancy Mace's States Reform Act, and she is, of course, a Republican heading that bill. And meanwhile, there's also the SAFE Banking Act, which seeks to legalize cannabis company banking services specifically before doing any sort of descheduling or decriminalization, sort of an incremental step to getting there. Supporters of any of those bills, depending on which one you're looking at, are really insistent and adamant upon getting theirs passed before anybody else's, or even in replacement of anybody else's. So my question for you is, in any of those, do you see any of them considering at all cannabis edibles, beverages, infusions, specific cannabinoids, or even ancillary companies in that legislation? And why are we not? Is it important to include such specific measures to avoid any regulatory gray area and to make sure that any sort of legislation that is implemented is truly the definition of comprehensive?
Yeah. Good questions. I would say in some cases yes, in some cases no. I think the federal government and the states could always be better about learning from the missteps of the past and communicating. That
Mm-hmm.
said, I don't even think it's to that level of importance yet. I mean, we just this I mean this is the very beginning of the federal discussion. I think we all need to be very happy with in just the last couple of years have made it a bipartisan issue where cannabis legalization is being talked about on both sides of the aisle. I'm like, that's a huge step, right? But
Mm-hmm.
how many states have we seen legalization proposed and it not get passed through on the first time? So our hearts need not be broken if we don't get it pushed through on this first attempt, right? And I think there's very little chance that we see the CAOA or even Nancy Mace's proposal pass through in their current form. I do, think that the Republican bill is actually quite interesting, but her being kind of a newer member to Congress, like I don't think it bodes well for the progress on that particular initiative.
Mm-hmm.
What I do think we have to look forward to is people realizing that okay, this might actually, as we have in the past, take some incremental improvements. So things like the Safe Banking Act, which doesn't really need to consider, edibles, beverages versus flour or oils. Um, just that would be a huge benefit to the industry and those trying to operate in the legal market. It would, break down some of those barriers and create a little bit more stable business. Um, the next step after that, I think the most likely, path forward is some form of decriminalization where, we can focus on the social equity issues and really, expunge people's records, get people out of jail, and focus on those efforts and building programs for reentry. And then, as far as the businesses go, I mean, like I said, we already have 40 states that have kind of in a way decided how they want to allow cannabis in their markets. And so if that
Mm-hmm.
leaves 10 states where we don't have a legal cannabis market, at least the advocates know where to go focus and focus their efforts, right? And then we could start, the process, which would the federal government would have to do if they decide to legalize, is like, how do we weave this all together to be, an integrated system? Like, how do we allow for cross-state commerce without undercutting, the social equity programs that have been implemented in these various states? And like, the federal government's not going to be able to do that. At least they might try, but not in an effective way, in my opinion. And
Right.
so there's so much work to be done because they have waited so long. like everyone points to Canada and like, oh, they have a federal legal system, but yeah, but Canada's like California legalizing, right? And as far as the population goes, and they did it early. They didn't let all the other provinces like skate ahead and like create all these like complex legal systems, whereas, the U.S. has, and so it's a completely different beast. I think if we can get safe banking and decriminalization in some fashion, maybe not even in the same bill, that those will be the necessary steps forward to at least lay the groundwork for an eventual legal system, statewide.
I like that you mentioned the sort of benefit or importance of maybe taking an incremental approach instead of just trying to hit it all, in one swing through maybe just one piece of legislation, which would I feel like naturally just be susceptible to not including everything or, not being very specific on certain measures and creating more of a gray area than perhaps we would want to see. And it's also great that you mentioned Canada in this and their approach to legalization. For those who may not know, the use of cannabis for recreational purposes became legal across the country in Canada on October 17th, 2018. And
Hmm.
then what they did was a year later, they did what was called their Cannabis 2.0 on October 17th, 2019, which specifically made cannabis edibles legal federally in Canada. Is that something that you would be in favor of seeing adopted in a potential U.S. cannabis legalization strategy when we do eventually get there? Hopefully, sometime sooner rather than later. But who knows with the glacial pace that the Congress likes to move at, and what sort of implications, if that were to happen, would you see it have on the cannabis beverage and edible industry?
Yeah, it's a very challenging question for me to answer because there's so the my own personal perspective on politics in general in the US is, starts to convolute the discussion around how cannabis should be rolled out. Um, you know,
Sure.
I guess I could tie it back to the fact that, the US is just so much bigger than Canada and it's a lot more complex. And, you know,
Yeah.
um, governing the decision for, 330 million people or however many people there are in the US now, like it's just really complicated, especially when you have a strong pull towards states' rights and decentralized government, right? And I think that that's going to be playing a bigger role in how we decide to do this in the near future. I think it would be a poor decision to only legalize, part of the industry like Canada did, right? You know, Canada naturally has like this mechanism to quickly iterate, which I think is really nice. Like they have mechanisms built into their legislation where the verbiage that is used, the laws and clauses, all that kind of stuff, it has to be revisited periodically and rewritten.
Mm.
And so they're actually going through this process right now where they're taking a look at what was put into place and actively like adjusting it to the needs of the market. We know that doesn't happen in the US. Like, once a law is set, it's like it is, the inertia of that particular legislation is it's almost locked in place. It takes a Herculean effort to get it, to get it manipulated. And that's
Yeah.
proven solely by the California market that I'm operating in, right? Like we've known that the tax structure and the legal market has not been a huge success since 2016 when it was originally implemented, and just now, Governor Newsom is looking at the tax structure for the market, and so it's like, okay, well that took I don't, 6 years, 6 years to
Yeah. Right.
really
Right.
reevaluate. Sorry, like time's getting away from me now. It's been a long journey. Um,
Totally.
but yeah, it's I think it's far more complicated. I do you know just the signaling of Canada being federally legal back in 2018 was really exciting. But as we saw, it wasn't a perfect model. There was a lot of exuberant capital that kind of got put into a bunch of public companies up there. That capital wasn't always
Hmm.
well shepherded. Um, so there's certainly pros and cons to both, but you know, I'll take basically anything that federally legalizes and decriminalizes the plant. So, you know,
Yeah.
the word incremental is important for me. The fight's never over, even after legalization. And so, if we can just make these steps and start, freeing it up, that's what I'm in favor of. And the faster we're able to do it at a federal level, takes away this gray area, what we were talking about in the last segment about, these kind of manufactured cannabinoids.
Yeah, absolutely. The the fight never stops, man. Not even I'm sure if and when a massive shift in cannabis policy does happen on the federal level, it will certainly be something to celebrate. But I hope to see it not lead to like us as a cannabis community, letting our foot off of the gas, because
Yeah.
there's always more education that needs to be out there. There's always more scientific study that can be done and research that can be done into the multitude of applications that hemp and cannabis offer. And so, yeah, I'm hoping for a change on the federal level, hopefully in my lifetime. But I certainly, it's certainly not lost on me that the fight and the advocacy does not stop there.
Absolutely.
With all that being said, we're already deep into January. It's already almost February as we're recording this. What have y'all got in the works over at Vertosa that you're looking forward to during the course of this year?
Yeah, we're in a very fortunate position. We have a bunch of great partners that we're working with, both on the brand side and supply chain side, and we just really look forward to continuing to lift up the supply chain and really build a lot more trust into it, so that we can work with all the manufacturers on the oil manufacturing and the cannabinoid side, and really make sure that we're creating the best products that are going to market. And then as far as our own strategy goes, we're doing this across multiple markets. I mentioned Canada, where we are very active with our partner up there. And then
Mm-hmm.
we are active in about 7 other states at current, and our pace of expansion is not slowing. And, this is not some world domination strategy. Really, what we're trying to do is provide a platform so that the brands that we do work with can cross state borders, because we know that's a big limitation when it comes to regulations. And so if we can create the same trusted ingredients in each market, then everything else can be shipped. The packaging, the inactive ingredients, and the brands, those are
Mm-hmm.
transferable. And so we're working with a number of brands on that expansion process right now, and then that's exciting. And so that's what we're focusing on this year, in addition to continually just making a more robust technology core. So, about 20%
Nice.
of our budget every month goes towards R&D and developing, whether it's better ingredients, more understanding of the experience itself, or working with other research institutes to kind of push the knowledge forward.
Right on. Well, we will certainly be keeping an eye on all of that and all that you've got going on over at Vertosa. Ben, I sincerely wish y'all all the best in what y'all are doing over there. Please continue to keep up the good work, and I wish you continued health and safety out here in the wild world, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, RJ. This has been really great.
Absolutely. Ben Larson, everybody. That is it for Hash It Out, y'all. Thank y'all so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. I'm your host, RJ Balde, and we will catch y'all in the next one. Peace out. Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out our channel. Click here to watch another episode of Hash It Out. To find more cannabis industry reporting, insider stories, and to stay up to date on the latest trends, make sure to subscribe and keep up with our TRICHOMES community app. Download it now for free, and we'll see you there.